Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 781 for the 24th of September 2023. Richard Saunders here in the Skeptic Zone studios, Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, Reiki. Reiki. Are you a Reiki master? Do you rake? Do you Reiki? Do you wave your hands around somebody and imagine there is some sort of mystical, magical, universal type energy from the universe being channeled through your head, through your arms, to your fingers, and to the other person you're treating? Lots of people do. They call themselves Reiki masters. You don't need a rake. Oh no. What's Reiki? What's it all about? And how is it being used on TikTok? TikTok Reiki healing. Coming up this week on the Skeptic Zone. Following that, from Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada, Adrienne Hill will bring you the Australian Skeptics Newsletter, written, of course, by Tim Mendham. And Tim Mendham will be appearing on next week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, talking about the Australian Skeptics National Convention, Skepticon, in early December in Melbourne. And he'll discuss some of the guests and topics that are in store for you at the annual convention. Then, to round off the show, the Trove segment looks at prophecy. Prophecy in the annals of Australian newspapers and so on. What was reported in decades and centuries past about prophecy. Now, thanks to those people who were inquiring, I'm feeling much better, almost completely better. I guess I'm about 95% better from my cold. It was just a cold, but it sort of lingered a bit. You know how these things do? And you think, am I ever really going to get better? And you cough a bit and it lingers. And anyway, it's almost nearly gone. But if you're not well at the moment, if you're under the weather, if you've got a cold and wrapped up in bed, I'm thinking about you, and I hope you get better soon. It's no fun. And I can tell you, I'm a miserable patient. I am not good when it comes to being ill or having colds or something like that. I just think it's a big waste of time. Stay tuned at the end of this episode. Do you stay tuned to a podcast? I guess so. For more announcements from me. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have some peanut puffs. The Aldi range of supermarkets here in Australia, about this time of year, around Oktoberfest time, sell these peanut puffs, which I find irresistible. I used to eat those many years ago when I lived in Germany. I'm going to have some of those while I do that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Now, over the past few years, we've been looking at TikTok to see what sort of interesting modalities are represented there. Of course, you can see everything on TikTok, from dancing cats to dogs in cars to cyclones to people doing all sorts of crazy things, and a lot of, supernatural claims. Yes, we've looked at various paranormal claims on TikTok, people giving readings, for example, talking with the dead. But this week, I thought we would look at people on TikTok delivering Reiki healing. Now, a couple of years ago in the Trove segment, we looked at Reiki. I always find Reiki to be a particularly interesting form of alternative, it's not alternative medicine, what is it, modality, claim. Let's see what a Reiki page has to say about Reiki. The International Center for Reiki Training at reiki.org. What is Reiki? Reiki is a Japanese technique for stress reduction and relaxation that also promotes healing. It is administered by, quote, laying on hands, end quote, and is based on the idea that an unseen, quote, life force energy, end quote, flows through us and is what causes us to be alive. If one's life force energy is low, then we are most likely to get sick or feel stress. And if it is high, we are more capable of being happy and healthy. The word Reiki is made of two Japanese words, rei, R-E-I, which means God's wisdom or higher power, and ki, K-I, which means life force energy. So Reiki is actually spiritually guided life force energy. A treatment feels like a wonderful glowing radiance that flows through and around you. Reiki treats the whole person, including body, emotions, mind, and spirit, creating many beneficial effects that include relaxation and feelings of peace, serenity, and well-being. Many have reported miraculous results. Reiki is a simple, natural, and safe method of spiritual healing and self-improvement that everyone can use. It has been effective in helping virtually every known illness and malady and always creates a beneficial effect. It also works in conjunction with all other medical or therapeutic techniques to relieve side effects and promote recovery. Amazing claims. It goes on to say, while Reiki is spiritual in nature, it is not a religion. It has no dogma. And there is nothing you must believe in order to learn and use Reiki. Well, that's not strictly true, is it? You have to believe that it actually works and there's some sort of unknown energy flowing through you and your hands into the subject. It goes on to say, in fact, Reiki is not dependent on belief at all and will work whether you believe in it or not, because Reiki comes from God. Many people find that using Reiki puts them more in touch with the experience of their religion rather than having only an intellectual concept of it. Now, turning to the Skeptics Dictionary on the topic of Reiki. Reiki, pronounced Reiki, is a form of energy healing that centers on the manipulation of ki, the Japanese version of chi. Rei, R-E-I, means spirit in Japanese. So Reiki literally means spirit life force. Like other counterparts in traditional Chinese medicine who use acupuncture, as well as their counterparts in the West who use therapeutic touch, the practitioners of Reiki believe that health and disease are a matter of the life force being disrupted. Belief in a life force known as vitalism was common in the West until the 19th century. Since then, the concept of life force has joined phlogiston, ether, and many other superannuated ideas on the rubbish heap of discarded scientific notions. And over at Quackwatch, and this is written on the 3rd of March 2022 by Stephen Barrett, MD, Reiki is nonsense. Reiki is one of several nonsensical methods commonly referred to as energy healing. These methods are based on the idea that the body is surrounded or permeated by an energy field that is not measurable by ordinary scientific instrumentation. The alleged force, said to support life, is known as ki in Japan, as chi or ki in China, and as prana in India. Reiki practitioners claim to facilitate healing by strengthening or balancing it. And I'll link to this page in the show notes as well. And there's more information there. But right at the bottom it says the bottom line. Reiki has no substantiated health value and lacks a scientifically plausible rationale. Science-based healthcare settings should not tolerate its use, and scarce government research dollars should not be used to study it further. Now, in my travels over the last few decades, I've almost lost count of the number of people I've encountered at various mind-body wallet fairs or here and there who use the moniker Reiki Master. People love to become a Reiki Master, and I guess it makes them feel very important because they think they've achieved some sort of degree, some sort of achievement. And again, it reminds me of something I labeled the fish cycle and the fishy cycle. I talk about this sometimes, where it's the feedback from the client who entrenches the belief in the practitioner. In other words, when somebody catches a fish and they tell the story of the fish grows and grows in the story. With the Reiki practitioner or the psychic or the homeopath, it's the feedback from happy customers that bolsters their own belief in what they're doing, bearing in mind that people who go to a Reiki practitioner or a homeopath or a psychic are by and large believers anyway. So any perceived benefit they feel, they will credit to the practitioner, Reiki, homeopath, psychic, and so on. They tell that to the practitioner acknowledges that and says to themselves, yes, of course, what I'm doing must be real. Now, if you've never seen somebody doing Reiki, it's bizarrely simple. When I've seen it at Mind Body Spirit, Mind Body Wallet festivals, the client is normally seated in a chair, the Reiki practitioner behind them. The Reiki practitioner normally shuts their eyes, not always, and then holds up their hands, fingers spread, and just sort of waves them around in the air near the back or the head or the arms of the client. And they've got a serene look on their face, and they might be saying something, and they just wave their hands around, close to the client, not exactly touching. Sometimes the client is lying on their back on a table, and the Reiki master is moving their hands along the body, and that's about the size of it. Now, of all the alternative things you see health-wise, I guess Reiki is one of the more harmless ones. Again, the subject will be relieved of some money for nothing, although they will get up and think that they feel better, or maybe they feel better, or they feel more relaxed. It's a comforting, nice thing to do. But when you get down to the brass tacks, of course, there's nothing happening. There's no magical, mystical energy flowing through the universe, through the practitioner, into the body of the subject, and that energy then doing any healing. Now, a quick search online with the search criteria, become a Reiki master. What do we have here? At naturalhealer.com.au, $77 Reiki master course online. Pay later. Includes all levels. Satisfaction and money-back guarantee. Another one, become a Reiki master, Reiki healing home course. Naturaltherapypages.com.au, become a Reiki master, studying Reiki in Australia. And that says Reiki is a holistic energy healing technique that treats the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of an individual, based on the concept that we all possess a life force energy responsible for keeping us breathing, good heavens, feeling, thinking, and functioning. This Japanese technique offers an array of benefits that can last a lifetime. And then it goes on to talk about the different levels of Reiki training. Level 1, often referred to as the first degree or Reiki 1, is the initial step in learning Reiki. At this level, students receive an attunement to Reiki energy, allowing them to channel and direct this healing energy for self-healing and the healing of others. Here, you learn how to tap into your energy channels and connect to the universal energy for personal spiritual development. Level 1 focuses primarily on self-practice and treating immediate family and friends. Then we go to level 2, expands upon the foundation established in level 1. At this stage, practitioners receive additional attunements and learn sacred symbols that enhance the power and effectiveness of Reiki energy. The next level is Reiki Master level, often called the third degree. At this stage, practitioners become Reiki Masters, receiving the final attunement and learning advanced techniques. And after that, you become a Reiki master teacher. Hello. On this page, we have another item here, another segment, What Science Says About Reiki. Several clinical trials and studies have been conducted to explore the effects of Reiki as a complementary therapy. While some studies have shown positive outcomes, it's important to note that the overall evidence base for Reiki is still limited. And more rigorous research is needed. However, let's get back to the main focus of this segment, which is Reiki on TikTok. Reiki on TikTok. Let's randomly have a look. Let's randomly dive into the mire of TikTok, looking for Reiki. And what does Ella bring us?
I'm going to energetically massage your brain. Please make sure you are consenting. We can begin.
Ella is waving her hands at the camera.
Yes. You know, coffee isn't actually your greatest friend when it comes to these things. You're kind of using up energy that you haven't made yet. In Chinese medicine, it's considered a yin food. It gives you an initial burst of energy, but then it takes it away.
All the time she is simply waving her hands in front of the camera. Thank you, Ella. Now, what does Bustle have on their channel?
This is what happens during a Reiki energy healing session. Reiki is a Japanese alternative therapy that involves moving universal energy into and around the body. A Reiki master starts by scanning the body to see which chakras are blocked. Then, gentle hand movements are used to guide the flow of this energy in such a way that unblocks and balances these chakras. What's really interesting is it can be done without actually touching the person, so it's super non-invasive and can even be done at long distances. What do you think of Reiki energy healing?
Well, that's an interesting question. The accompanying video is somebody lying on the ground, on the floor, with a nice pillow and a blanket, and the presumed Reiki master waving his hands all around the subject who has their eyes closed. So, go figure. Now, here's Grace. Now, I must say, a lot of these videos are simply people waving their hands at the camera, and that's it. There's not much else going on. So, we have Grace with a serene expression on her face, looking directly in the camera, waving her hands around. And, well, not much else. Thank you, Grace.
If this video has found you right now, then this is no coincidence, because the universe has delivered me to you during this time to help to shift you into the energies of physical attractiveness and beauty. If you accept this energy alignment today, then all you need to do is simply nod or say, I accept. Let's begin.
Let's not. That is Healing and Beyond, a gentleman who looks like an old hippie waving a crystal around. So apparently something to do with Reiki. Now, what does Alex have for us?
Reiki in 60 seconds. Take a deep breath to center yourself. Then take your hands to heart center and start to rub them together to build heat. Then you're going to start to separate your hands just a little bit, but so you can still feel the heat bouncing between your two palms off of one another. For me, it almost feels like two magnets that aren't attracted to each other. You can play with going out farther and coming in closer, maybe like you have some Reiki bubble gum between your hands. Then I like to take my Reiki ball and I like to put it over my head and still feel the heat bouncing between my two hands, and you'll start to feel like a tingliness, groundedness, or maybe even some psychic downloads while you're here. You can move your hands to different parts of your body, still feeling that heat and that energy moving from both your palms.
Yes, well, she's rubbing her hands together, holding them apart, lifting them over her head and then bringing them down to her chest with her eyes shut. So I imagine that feels quite nice. Now let's see what Reiki Matt, as in Matthew, has for us.
Stop scrolling for just 1 minute. With your consent, I'm going to give you a Reiki brain massage.
Oh boy. Again, he's waving his hands at the camera. Apparently my brain is being massaged by Reiki at the moment. Or not. Thank you, Reiki Matt. Now here's one from Hannah and Jeremy, the channel, where the subject is lying on their back, and presumably Hannah has a pair of scissors above the subject. Let's see what happens.
Stop.
Going to hear a sound, but nothing will touch you.
Presumably it's Hannah. She's snipping the air above the subject with the scissors.
Simply trying to break the energy spirals. They look like little tornadoes, just sort of swirling up by introducing some vibration, the sound of the scissors. These have been sitting some of my stones, so they've been absorbing their energy.
So it really does prompt the question, does she really believe she is snipping energy spirals with a pair of scissors above the subject? It would not surprise me in the least that she really believes that this is happening. But of course we can't know for sure. Finally, we'll look at a very interesting one from somebody, a channel called Molly Donlan.
Here's how Reiki really works, coming from a former Reiki skeptic turned full-time Reiki master teacher. You have two sides to your nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight, flight, and freeze response, and your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest, restore, and heal. Spending too much time in your sympathetic nervous system causes damage to the mind and body. It can suppress your immune functionings, increase your blood pressure, create stores of fat in the body. This side of the nervous system was designed for short-term activation, like we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and need to run away. But modern day stresses keep us in the sympathetic nervous system for longer periods of time. Reiki helps you flip the switch from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system, where healing occurs. Imagine having instant stress relief in the palm of your hands, literally. Studies have proven Reiki to be more effective than a placebo, and they've even done testing on rats. If you're ready to learn this lifelong tool you can use anytime you need calm in the midst of chaos, go ahead and click the thing in my thing to sign up for my next training.
That's very interesting. Now, of course, Reiki, the claims of Reiki, are absolutely something that the Australian Skeptics would consider a worthwhile challenge for our $100,000 prize. So any Reiki masters out there listening in Australia, if you think that you have the goods, if you think you can channel universal energy through your hands or your feet or however it's supposed to work, then of course you can contact the Australian Skeptics. We can design a mutually agreed test, and you can Reiki away. Next time you're at a Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, a Mind, Body, Wallet Festival, keep an eye out for Reiki. It's easy to find. A lot of people do it, I guess because it's so easy to do. But on TikTok, many people simply hold their hands up in front of the camera, have a serene look on their face, say some comforting words, and wave their hands about.
Richard, how do I get better at telling if people are lying?
It's really simple. What you need to do...
Are ghosts real?
Well, actually, funny you should ask that, because I've
How
discovered...
do I improve my memory?
I've got this great trick.
Can you make me happier?
Okay, look. For answers to 1,000 questions about the incredible world of human behaviour and the psychology of everyday life, join me, psychologist Richard Wiseman...
And me, science journalist Marnie Chesterton...
on Richard Wiseman's On Your Mind, a new podcast from Podimo and Telltale.
Can I win the lottery?
Probably not.
Hello Hello, everyone. This is Adrienne Hill, back at Skookum Studios in Calgary, Canada, and I'm here to read the highlights from the Australian Skeptics Newsletter. This is newsletter number 182, and you can subscribe to this newsletter and get it delivered to your inbox every other week, complete with links to all the stories. Just visit www.skeptics.com.au. But now, let's see what Tim Mendham has for us this week. Hi all, says Tim. UFOs, or UAPs, have featured in the press recently with the Pentagon's view presented a while ago, and now NASA's prognostications. Both authorities say, yes, there are unknowns, but the key aspect is that they're unknown. Unlike the evidence offered to the Mexican Congress of actual, real, genuine, mummified alien corpses, which look pretty pathetic actually. No threat to life on Earth from them. And speaking of UAPs, we understand why they changed the phrase from unidentified flying objects, which implies they are actual physical things under control of some power, to unidentified aerial phenomena, things or not things in the sky. But why did they change that to unidentified, anomalous phenomena? Okay, not necessarily in the sky, but that anomalous could refer to non-extraterrestrial, Bigfoots, Nessies, psychic powers, and various unnamed politicians. Oh, Tim, I had a hard time getting through that one. Suggestions are welcome. Meanwhile, read on. Tim. Okay, Tim, I'll do just that. And I'll try not to giggle too much. Bent Spoon nomination now open. This is your chance to nominate the wackiest or weirdest claim and claimant of the year. Nominations can be made via the website or by emailing to editor@skeptics.com.au. For international listeners, make sure you nominate somebody who is active in Australia. NASA's report on UAPs. For those of you who didn't stay up in the middle of the night to see what NASA thinks of UFOs or UAPs, and frankly, it wasn't long on detail. Here's the full report with pages 24 through 33 giving the real gist and heft. And speaking of UFOs, the latest edition of the quarterly UFO PhotoCat blog out of Spain has a good discussion on the recent claims by David Grush in the US Congress of actual alien bodies and bits of spacecraft, but no actual evidence at all. Narcissists are far more likely to buy into conspiracy theories. Bond University PhD student Tyler Cosgrove has been researching the different characteristics and personality traits associated with belief in conspiracies, with the view that, very consistently, there is a link between conspiracy beliefs and narcissism. Conspiracies make people feel special, which can be why they are so alluring to narcissists. However, he adds that recent research suggests that people tend to pick and choose theories that support their belief system and worldview. What's next in the war against pseudoscience? Although the gains made in promoting rational thinking over legitimized quackery in India are small, they are gathering strength. Hopefully. Police debunk rumors of people with paranormal powers. This report from Nigeria, in fairly eccentric English, is important because it comes from a country where witchcraft is taken so seriously that many women and children are murdered when accused of such practices. And after being in Salem last week, it's sad to realize this is still going on. Astrology won't liberate anyone. Quote, attempts to build a left-wing occultism are fundamentally unserious, end quote. Any article that includes leftist astrology, post-colonial astrology, queer political astrology, Harry Potter houses, and lathe-turned sculptures in ivory has to be pretty all-inclusive. What is this about? Maybe we should offer a prize for the best suggestion, or whether this should go down the bottom of the newsletter with the weird stuff. I'm thinking yes. Definitely intriguing, we think. The September 2023 issue of The Skeptic is out in digital format, and the hard copy version will be in mailboxes soon. It's packed full of essential reading and goodies. A special feature looks at the risks, the critics, and the hoaxes associated with the final and high-profile days of the golden age of parapsychology. There's also a review of the World Health Organization's promotion of alt-med, and the rehabilitation of Uri Geller, at least as far as the New York Times is concerned. Also, Richard Saunders investigates so-called spirit boxes. You can read that report on the WHO's Embracing Woo as a sample from the September issue, free to view at skeptics.com.au. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you'd better get to it. You can sign up for a hard copy or digital edition, or both, since the digital is offered free to those who take up the hard copy version. Contact the editor if you're not sure if your existing subscription needs renewing. And make sure you include really long words to confuse them. Skeptics in action. If you have any ideas for stories or want to contribute to Skeptics communications, such as the magazine or Facebook page, or just have something you want to get off your chest, then you're welcome to get in touch. News leads should be sent to newstips@skeptics.com.au. Submissions for the magazine, etc. should go to editor@skeptics.com.au. Comments and suggestions should also go to editor@skeptics.com.au. Items of interest. John Edward says he, quote, welcomes skepticism, end quote. Despite having been called a fraud for decades, the man who talks to the dead says he has no qualms about people questioning his abilities, but only if they are willing to open their mind. By which he must mean, quote, and turn off our brain, end quote. Monster Marathon. If you've got a spare 3 hours, you might like this compilation of Monster Quest, a TV series on popular cryptids. Don't look for an overly skeptical assessment, though. Paranormal on stage and screen. Paranormal Activity crossing over to the London stage. The highly successful Found Footage horror series will try its hand at scaring theatergoers in the West End. The first in the series, presumably the basis for the play, is considered to be among the most profitable movies ever made, grossing $193.4 million globally, on a total production budget of $215,000. Ufologist shows alien corpses to Mexican Congress. The Mexican Congress recently heard testimony on UFOs and the prospect of alien life. Self-described ufologist and self-described journalist Jaime Maussan brought 2 caskets into the congressional chambers and revealed what he claimed to be the bodies of aliens, non-human remains estimated to be 1,000 years old. They look like piñatas to us. And according to one University of Chicago expert, this is not Maussan's first time making such claims. Wow. Oh my. This whole UFO thing is just turned into quite a gong show. Travel tip. 10 Canadian spooky spots for under $50 each. And that's Canadian $50, of course, for travelers who want cut-rate ghosts. And no doubt, Adrienne Hill, well, that's me, who hails from that part of the world and reads this newsletter, as I'm doing right now, on the Skeptic Zone, has been to all of these. And I say, ha! Canada, like Australia, is a rather large country. And as it turns out, I have only been to number 8, which is Cragdarock Castle in Victoria, British Columbia, and number 4, Heritage Park here in Calgary. And sadly, I found neither to be particularly spooky, though admittedly, I visited during the day, and spookiness usually doesn't happen in daylight hours, apparently. Well, that's the newsletter. And did you notice my Canadian phrase this week? The Gong Show was an American TV show that originally aired in 1976, showcasing a mix of talent in front of a panel of 3 celebrity judges. If the talent was worse than usual, any judge could stop the act by hitting a large gong. Of course, Canadians with cable TV had access to the show at the time, and the phrase, "It was such a gong show," was born. And it describes experiences or events that had become crazy, chaotic, or disastrous. And I think the UFO bit is a little crazy. What is interesting about this phrase is that despite the show being American in origin, "It's a Gong Show" seems to be uniquely Canadian. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill.
You've probably heard the saying, knowledge is power. While that's true, there's just too much to know. Plus, we carry access to nearly all of humanity's knowledge in our pockets. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of misinformation out there. Conspiracy theories, propaganda, pseudoscience, science denial, all of which are effective because they appeal to our biases and emotions. As Richard Feynman reminded us, no one can fool us like we can. Protecting yourself from misinformation requires better thinking. When you need reliable information, do you know where to find it and how to use it to make wise decisions? And importantly, are you aware of the thinking errors that might cause you to fall for misleading information? The bottom line is knowledge is not enough. Thinking is power. I'm science educator and communicator Melanie Teresa King. Please visit thinkingispower.com to learn more about critical thinking, information literacy, and science literacy skills. Educators can find useful and engaging course materials and assignments for their students. And for a daily-ish dose of better thinking, follow Thinking is Power on X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Once again to visit the Trove archives at trove.nla.gov.au. Of course, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, full of digitised newspapers and magazines and such like. I didn't know there were so many newspapers in Australia over the last couple of centuries. And it's a great online treasure trove for us to raid every week to see what people in the past reported on about various skeptical topics. Now, last week we were looking at the return of Christ, which I don't think has happened in the week since. So this week we might look along a similar vein, prophecies. Sort of like predictions, but they seem to have a bit more of a religious connotation, don't they? Prophecies. Well, let's start with the Newcastle Sun, dated the 20th of April, 1936. Prophecies that had not failed. Biblical prophecies, apparently impossible of fulfillment, have come to pass, said evangelist L.F. Ware at the Newcastle Town Hall last night. More than 1,000 prophecies were contained in the most wonderful book the world has ever seen, he explained, and not one of these had failed or could fail. The ancient cities of Bethsaida and Capernaum, I think that's pronounced, were, as predicted, reduced to ruins. Prophets had decreed that the Philistines would vanish as a race and that their cities would perish. Ashkelon was desolation, and the giant cities of Brashan were mute evidence of the infallibility of the Bible. Ekron, despite its ancient grandeur, was now only a wretched village. Gaza, a city of white marble renowned for its wealth and luxury, was in ruins. Ashdod was now noted more for its scorpions than for its stately beauty. Tyre, the London of the ancient world, was now only a flat rock on which fishermen spread their nets. Babylon was now heaps of ruins. And the Arabians were afraid to pitch their tents there, as the Bible had decreed. Nineveh had gone. Samaria had perished. Esau's descendants had died out. Edom was desolate. Sounds pretty bleak, doesn't it? The Jews were a scattered people, and a byword among the nations, he added, and Jerusalem was still trodden down by the Gentiles, while the Arabs lived on in Palestine exactly as predicted. Prophets in the New Testament testified to the truth of the Bible, and the Old Testament writers furnished irrefutable evidences of the truth of the sacred scriptures. So there you go. I think Palestinian and Jewish people might have a few possible objections to some of the characteristics mentioned in that report. And now we come to an item in the Evening Journal from Adelaide, dated the 28th of May, 1910. Very long way back. Astrologer's clients. Fortune teller whose prophecies failed. A Paris fortune teller and astrologer, some of whose clients had recently been disappointed with his prophecies, have laid a complaint to the police. The principal complainants are those whose love affairs have not turned out according to expectations, particularly jilted lovers and disappointed brides. A police officer, who was instructed to make inquiries, has discovered that the so-called astrologer has as many as 15,000 customers of all classes. His fee for a complete fortune was £2, but his prophetic powers could also be employed for as little as 4 shillings. A selection of his clients and admirers were about to form an association to be called the Universal, Fraternal and Spiritualistic Union, and were proposing to buy him a charming country house when the complaint against the astrologer was lodged. The business of fortune-telling is illegal in France, but it is impossible to put it down, and it does not seem likely that this astrologer, who has just been engaging the attention of the Paris police, will be any the worse off. Now let's look in the Northern Champion from Taree in New South Wales, dated the 5th of March, 1947. 5 prophecies that failed to come true. There was considerable amusement at the Raleigh Council PPU meeting at Urunga when Mr. A.J. Sharp submitted a motion from Raleigh branch, quote, that Professor Copeland's pathetic letter be framed and hung in head office, end quote. Mr. Sharp explained that the letter in question was one written by Professor Copeland on August 24th, 1945, giving reasons why farmers could not be paid. Now, I am not up on my pre-decimal pronunciations of British currency, but it's 1/11, then 1/2 D, and I think, looking up a chart here, it's pronounced 1 shilling 11 pence halfpenny per pound for butter, as recommended by the then existing Butter Costs Committee. The letter, Mr. Sharp added, contained 5 prophecies telling of the good times ahead for the producers, but unfortunately not one of the prophecies came true. Mr. Potts, Karangai, we ought to ask the government to sack Professor Copeland on the strength of not being able to pick one winner in 5. Mr. Johnson, General Secretary, said that the letter had been very strongly objected to by the PPU at the time. He added that perhaps better use could be put to it than having it framed and hung at head office. It could form the base of another case for a better price. Mr. M. Goldstein, Bellingen, suggested that the context of the motion be altered, asking that the Central Executive refer the letter to the present Butter Costs Advisory Committee, asking that best possible use be made of it. This was agreed to, and the motion carried the new form. Butter prices prophecies way back in 1947. Now let's see what the Armadale Express and New England General Advertiser has to say on the 7th of May, 1897. Historical prophecies that failed. Oh dear, more failed prophecies. In these times of cheap vaticination, and that's another word for prophecy, and short-dated prophecies, it may not be amiss to cast a retrospective glance on the few of the most monumental mistakes ever achieved in this line. Here are a few of these famous contributions to the history of human error. 1. Aristotle said that slavery would last forever, or would cease only when a shuttle would weave of its own accord. And that's, I think he's referring to part of the loom. A double mistake this, for slavery is all but abolished, and thanks to invention, the shuttle may be said to work of its own accord. 2. Before 50 years are over, all Europe will be Republican or Cossack. Prophesied the exile of St. Helena in the first decade of this century. We are now nearing its fag end, but old Europe is less Republican than ever, and is still some way from universal Cossackery. And for those wondering, fag end I think refers to a cigarette, when a cigarette was almost put out. In other words, at the end, towards the end. 3. Italy is but a geographical expression and will never be anything else, opined Prince Metternich, who I have not heard of, and just before his death he saw what he considered utopia on the point of becoming a reality. 4. The railways will never be of any use for transport of goods, rang out M. Theirs, leading a chorus of sententious economists. Sententious, meaning self-righteous. I am learning a lot in Trove today. 5. There is no marrow for universal suffrage, exclaimed M. Guizot on the eve of the very revolution which sent him into exile and promulgated universal suffrage as sovereign law. Talk about a run of outs here. 6. Never was M. Ruffer's answer to those asking after Mentana when Rome would become the capital of Italy, a very short time after the thing was done. 7. United States of Europe was the prophecy of all ardent Democrats from Victor Hugo to Carlo Cattaneo, and its fulfillment was to take place immediately after the downfall of the Napoleonic Empire. It is 25 years now since that eventful moment, but the states of Europe are, if anything, more disunited and aggressive than ever. And sadly, we knew what was coming not too far off in the future for these people. Perhaps the ancients, who knew a thing or two, were right in saying that the future is on the lap of the gods. And that's credited to St. James' Gazette. Let's have a look at the Geraldton Guardian and Express from Western Australia, dated the 21st of May 1931. End of the world. Prophecies which failed. Slight mistakes. A number of members of Parliament and others recently received a cyclo-style circular from Glasgow announcing that the end of the world was to occur on the 1st of May. Originally, it appears, this happy event was fixed for May 31st last, but there was some hitch or miscalculation which resulted in a postponement for 11 months. There may have been a great many predictions of this kind, but always when the appointed day has arrived, things have gone on just as usual. Only once did it seem as if the prophets might be on the right track. An American evangelist announced some years ago that the millennium had begun invisibly in 1874 and that the end of the world would follow in 1914. When war broke out in August of the latter year, his followers felt quite sure that their faith was about to be justified, but events turned out otherwise. In spite of all disappointments, however, the prophets still continue to prophesy and to find people to believe them. Nothing has changed. About 2 years ago, a couple of Americans took up their homes to a sort of modern Noah's Ark, which was painted in gaudy colours and adorned with stars and other symbols. They announced that a second flood was to be expected very soon, and that they had constructed this ark in order to save their followers from the devouring waters. As the ark was only 60 feet long, they apparently did not expect the number of the faithful to be very large. And unlike Noah, they had no intention of wasting accommodation on animals. No room for critters was their motto. But the flood, which should really have occurred by now, has failed to materialize. Possibly, here again, there has been a slight mistake about the date. Flood prophecies seem to be favourites. There is one to the effect that Western Europe, probably including England, is to be engulfed by the waters. Perhaps as a foretaste of this greater calamity, the destruction of a famous English seaside resort was predicted a little while ago, but the anticipated disaster failed to occur. And then there are some Americans who expect that King David and certain other Old Testament heroes will shortly return to Earth. And in readiness for this event, they are providing a 15,000-pound house and 16-cylinder car for David's use. There have already been claimants for the house and car, but so far none has been accepted. All sorts of dates, mostly based upon the interpretation of texts in the book of Revelation, have been confidently put forward for the end of the world. It was expected in the year 1000, and the numbers of people anxious to make their peace with heaven before the last day arrived made over all their property, which they thought would be of no further use to them, to the church. Then, when they discovered the world wasn't going to end just yet, they wanted their property back, and found that the church was quite determined to stick to it. In Great Britain, 1660, 1688, 1700, 1864, and 1866 have all been announced as dates for the end of the world, and each of these predictions has found believers. And the American prophecies of this kind have been too numerous to mention. The curious thing about them is that the believers don't seem at all discouraged when their prophet proves to be wrong. As a rule, they calmly accept his explanation that a slight mistake has been made and believe in the new date he announces as implicitly as they did in the old. Now that is remarkable because that could have been written today, and that article dates from 1931. So people in 1931 knew exactly what was going on with the psychology of believers, and nothing has changed. So there we go, some of the prophecies reported on in the pages of Australian newspapers, going back quite a long time, as it happens. But of course, you too can go back quite a long time when you visit the pages of Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, because as I've always discover, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Now, coming up here in Sydney on the 5th of October, Sydney Skeptics in the Pub will feature me. I'm going to be giving my workshop, The Skeptical Box of Tricks, including how to bend spoons and how to divine for water, or how that appears to work, how to do those energy balance wristband tricks that fooled many people, and everybody will be learning how to make a little piece of origami. The Skeptical Box of Tricks here at Sydney Skeptics in the Pub, and that'll be on the first Thursday of the month, the 5th of October. And everybody is welcome. That's at the Occidental Hotel, kicking off at 6 p.m, and you'll find that hotel just near Wynyard Station here in Sydney. On next week's episode, as we mentioned before, I'll be chatting to Tim Mendham about the upcoming Skepticon convention here in Australia. And also, in the Trove segment, I'll be looking at some of the references to the late Barry Williams, the former president and editor of the Skeptic magazine here in Australia. He was an active skeptic for many years, one of the original skeptics here in Australia, and of course, he featured in many newspaper items over the years. I also notice, looking at my inbox, that the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival is once again coming to Sydney, comes every 6 months, and it starts on the 12th of next month. Maybe it might be worth a visit, who knows. But for this week, where are those cats? Where are the Skeptic Zone cats? They haven't appeared on the show for a while. Hang on. Open the studio door. Well, they've had their breakfast already, you see, so they've decided it's time for a nap. So we better let sleeping cats lie. Until next week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to those people who listen after the music for the dice game. This is where we roll a 10-sided die, or a 6 or a 12 or whatever I have. It's a 10. Normally it's a 10. It's a nice decimal type number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10. You use your psychic magic, predicting, looking into the future, spooky powers, spooky action at a distance, and see if you can guess what number will come up. I'm going to roll it 3 times, or maybe 4. We'll see. Here's the first roll coming up. 1. All right. Write that down. Guess again. Here it comes. Roll number 2. 7. And the last roll. Here it comes. Guess away. 6. 1, 7, and 6. And now I will roll 2. 2 at once to give us a number 1 to 100. So, one more chance. 1 to 100. And it is 81. Today's winning numbers. 1, 7, 6, and 81.